Okay, so I wanted to actually do this video on Angel Ramirez. It's probably going to be the last one for a couple weeks. But I wanted to basically talk about how he basically had the assumption that Hispanics were better than black people. If you look deeply into his comments on how he was saying, I know the black part of his name, he meant Jordan, which isn't black, but he claimed was the black part of his name, disgusts me. And I want to get into that because it's like, where and when and how do I ever act like blackness disgusts me? If I am one to constantly promote the beauty of black women, where am I and how am I disgusted by blackness? That's what my channel is based off of colorism not existing, and through that, basically acknowledging the beauty of blackness and not giving in to the ideas of other beauty standards or trying to vie with others to be something they're not, basically. So it's kind of like weird to me because it's like, why would you think my perspective would be that Hispanic is better? I understand why he feels that way. Being half Puerto Rican and half Jamaican, it makes sense. Many Jamaicans have a huge history in actually, bleaching their skin. And I've talked about that plenty of times. So there's that portion to it, glorification of more Hispanic features in that community. And of course, they don't have an American pride situation going on because they're not American. So. And then, the Puerto Rican side, there's a lot of racism with Puerto Ricans. And I've seen many channels talk about this. There's a lot of racism. I have looked at it myself. I've done research, basically, as a research associate in the past. And many at the time, they like to identify as white, even though biologically they're not. And they glorify whiteness in their country, too. So I understand why he thought Hispanic would be seen as better by me, but the thing is here, not everyone is messed up like his family is. My family specifically, like nobody asked me, but my family specifically, for one, is a black supremacist family, up my mother's side and father's side for that matter. So we don't hold Hispanic people above us, I'm sorry. But then it's not even that, because my mother's parents and my father's parents, I think, one of his parents at least, were against white people often. They had kind of an anti-white sentiment. My mother never had an anti-white sentiment, but she sure had an anti-Hispanic sentiment. And the thing is, with the whole situation there is, I have always been taught when I was a kid different things that were very negative about Hispanic people. For example, being overweight, being lazy, being trashy, being even unattractive, not making money. The best that I was taught that they could do is basically be a busser at some place for 20 years. Criminals, drugs, people who live on welfare, have too many kids. I saw this with my own eyes, one, and my mother would point it out, like, look at these people. And she would point out that there are no high-class Hispanics. She'd also point out that there are no high-class, like, first world Hispanic countries. The best countries on this side of the hemisphere are white or black. Hispanic countries are behind the white and black countries. So, the things that I was taught about Hispanics was not positive in any regard. With that said, I try to put that to the side. I always do. I always am like, race does not define who you are, or, what kind of character or success or value you are as a person. I try to keep that in mind. But some things I've seen with some Hispanic people, including this one, is racism. There's a constant systemic racism with Hispanic people, and they are much more able to get away with it. Also, there are plenty of Hispanic countries where they do really, really horrendous things to Black people. We all know about what's going on with the Haitian people and some other Hispanic countries as well. So I'm just saying, specifically on that issue, you won't be very welcoming to a people who are not welcoming to you, especially a people that you were taught not to be welcoming to. But at the same time, I'm always like, eh, I can't judge a person by their race because it makes no sense to me. Because it's like, it's a skin tone, it's just got to do with your face, but it's not really got to do with who you are as a person. So I don't exclude Hispanic men out of options for dating, really. But you can see from my behavior that I do not prefer them. I would prefer someone who is white over someone who is Hispanic, because the reason why is because culturally. That's what I tell myself, that it's a cultural situation. I have much more cultural similarities to a white American who's actually got ancestry here for a long time, just like I do. Not like a Hispanic person who has a very different culture than me and doesn't really understand my culture at all, because, I'm a new entity to America, to them, because they're not familiar with Black American people or our history. That's why I always say that I've only dated or been involved with only like one or two guys who were visibly Hispanic. I live in an area where there are a lot of Hispanic people. So sometimes even the people who look white are part Hispanic, or they might be Hispanic themselves, just happening to look white, basically. So, I mean, like, that happens. But you can kind of tell from my options, actually, what I choose usually is someone who looks white. It's just what it is. In most cases, I would say so. Maybe in one case, I would say maybe it didn't look white, but most of the time, I think they might look white, or not really pay attention to their race, kind of thing. But I do know that generally for me, the people I relate to are usually more Americanized, so that kicks out a lot of different Hispanic people in general. But like I said, I find that there's a lot of racism, so it can go mutually where we don't prefer each other, kind of thing. So I don't know, that's all I have to say in this video. People wanted to think that I saw, like, Hispanic people as being better than me, or, having disgust for Black people. But the reality of the situation is I generally defend Black men when people attack Black men. But, of course, to him, he thought just because I don't suck Black dick, that means I must be disrespecting them and be disgusted with them, which I've never implied.